What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and if you're enjoying the content here on my channel, then make sure you hit the like button and make sure you hit subscribe so you can help decide what direction the content on my channel goes in the foreseeable future. Okay, so after making the video on answering the question, is Superman a speedster like the Flash? One of the things that I wanted to do, or at least one of the things I asked you guys to do, was begin posting questions that you had down in the comment section. And one of the questions that was asked is, can the Flash fly like Superman? Now, like that Superman video, there's going to be the short answer and the long answer. The short answer is no. There are no members of the Flash family that can stand in one place, look up, and then just take off. It doesn't work that way. They are able to fly to a degree, but different writers have done this different ways. The long answer really ties into this notion of power scaling. For those of you guys who don't know, power scaling is like this concept of trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, right? Like it's shuffling up the pieces on a board in an attempt to make them fit. For example, name where the Submariner defeated the Incredible Hulk. In Hulk Annual back in 1997 or 1993, I can't remember which year, the Incredible Hulk defeated Gladiator, one of the many versions of Superman that exist in Marvel Comics. Using power scaling, I could then say, name where the Submariner would defeat Gladiator, because he defeated the guy who defeated Gladiator. That's nonsense. Like name where the Submariner would get decimated by Gladiator. But power scaling is an attempt to explain that, and it's got merit in some circumstances. But again, if I give you a square peg and I give you a square hole, that peg will fit into that hole every single time. But if I give you a square peg and a round hole, you might be able to just like force it in. But if you cut the square peg into a circle, then you'll be able to get it in. And that's what power scaling does. Again, the biggest reason why power scaling is an issue is because it treats characters as if they're static, right? Like as if they never change, but they do. For example, the Incredible Hulk was never able to breathe underwater until Hulk issue number 77 in 2005, when he suddenly developed the ability to breathe underwater because the writer wanted him to. And that's the nature. The reason why I bring this up is because of the nature of the Flash. While the Flash is not necessarily able to fly, so to speak, the Flash can run on air. This happened in the New 52 with the Flash issue number 26, and it was like Flash out of his element or Flash out of water or something along those lines. I can't remember, but it was basically a scene where Barry Allen ran on clouds. He ran on air. And the justification the writer gave to this story was that when you're high enough in the atmosphere because it's so cold, moisture is converted to these sort of crystal particles. And the Flash can basically use the speed force to make these crystal particles come together and then use them as a surface and run on it. It's speed force. I don't have to explain anything. Just the way the speed force works. I mean, that's one of the caveats of the Flash. Like, hey, how in the world was a Flash able to do that? I don't know, speed force. What do you want me to tell you? It's kind of how that thing comes together. But aside from like running on air, there have been instances where a Flash was legitimately able to fly. But much like that circumstance, the explanation was not very solid. So when you ask the question, can the Flash fly like Superman? I'm assuming that you're talking about Barry Allen or Wally West. Those are usually the two most popular versions of the Flash that people point to. Now, there was a point where Bart Allen, the, I guess, grandson, I think it is, of Barry Allen from like the 31st century or something like that, was actually the Flash for a time after the events of Infinite Crisis. It was a story called The Flash, Fastest Man Alive, and it ran for 12 issues, I think it was. And then of course, Wally West came back and then, he went back to being the Flash again. However, there are members of the Flash family who are not Flashes themselves. The character that we're going to be referencing in this video is a guy named Johnny Quick. Now, in December of 1940, the first Flash, so to speak, was a guy named Jay Garrick. He was basically the first person whose powers were basically just running super fast on land. The result is that his stories took off. People absolutely loved it. A guy who was basically faster than Superman, but was confined to the ground, was really intriguing at the time. In September of 1941, DC introduced Johnny Quick. Now, where Jay Garrick gained his powers from exposure to heavy water, he passed out, he woke up in a hospital, and found that he could run at the speed of sound, Johnny Quick was not as fast. But Johnny Quick, or Johnny Chambers, depending on what you want to call him, had basically cracked this formula to give himself super speed. And that's the way his character went for quite some time, from 1941 all the way up to when he was reintroduced in the mid-1950s, even all the way up to Crisis on Infinite Earths in the post-crisis landscape. But the idea here is that in All-Star Squadron number 22 in 1983, Johnny Quick flew. And there was no explanation as to why. It was really just like a guess, right? Like he's basically jumping over cars and then he just flies in the air. Now, this was part of a story that involved a character named Ultra Humanite, which is kind of a weird situation. But the explanation given here is that he was somehow able to use his powers to negate the effects of gravity. And that's it. That's the only explanation we get. Because of the fact that DC was crafting stories in the 1970s and 1980s for the sole purpose of boosting readership, trying to get people back in, and really just kind of giving characters whatever powers they wanted to give them to tell whatever story they wanted to tell at the time, the idea of Johnny Quick being able to fly was passed on to his daughter, Jessie Quick. The problem with this was that this was super short-lived. 2 years later, DC launched Crisis on Infinite Earths, and Crisis on Infinite Earths served the purpose of not only rebooting the DC landscape, but because of the fact that Gwen Stacy had died in 1971 and ushered in this era of realism in comics, which is to say, making characters more grounded. In the post-crisis landscape, DC took a page from the Marvel guidebook and then said, okay, so now characters' powers are going to be more reasonable and they're going to be more grounded. That's the reason why in 1975, I think it was, after Mort Weisinger retired from editing Superman, Julius Schwartz took over. He cut Superman's powers in half. He rendered all kryptonite inert and then kept Superman confined to Earth. He was more grounded. He was more reasonable. Fans hated it. They wanted to see Superman in space doing off-the-wall Silver Age Superman crazy stuff. So ultimately things went back to the way they were before. But for the most part, the idea of characters just being able to arbitrarily fly in a forward direction was gone when it came to members of the Flash family. It was really just this idea that they could use their super speed for a variety of different things. Like they could create, wind tunnels. They could run super, super fast and then just lunge forward and go further than they normally would be able to go because they were moving so fast. Their momentum would literally carry them in a forward direction that would create the illusion of flying. And so that was really about it. That was really as realistic and practical as it got. Again, that runs all the way up to the New 52. Of course, this was really most prominent during Mark Waid's run of The Flash. And the reason why I say that is because, again, with the concept of running on air, there was a story called The Flash Born to Run. And it was basically Mark Waid's introduction into the Flash mythos, which is to say the first story arc where he took over the Flash line of comics, focusing on Wally West. And in this story, Wally West quite literally outruns the universe. Like he just runs in space. There's no surface for him to run on. He's just running through space and then arrives back on Earth. It defies all normal logic of the Flash because the Flash's power is being able to run at super speed, and you can't really run if you don't have a surface to run on. So again, that's why things get kind of crazy. Now, the argument presented in that story, if I remember correctly, and I'd have to go back and read it again, was that the universe itself was kind of like a surface. He was running on his own friction. I don't know, something along those lines. But the idea was that it was basically a story told just for the purpose of being able to tell that story. So it was kind of bonkers. But hopefully that presents some kind of a answer to you guys. Hopefully it, gives you what you were looking for. Again, the short answer is that no member of the Flash family can stand in one place, look up, and just propel themselves in a forward direction. They have to either be running and lunge themselves in a forward direction, or they just kind of have to, run on air because the writer wants them to. Kind of a weird thing. But with that being said, guys, we're going to go ahead and bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like. And yeah, I will catch you all later. Peace.